I stood in the doorway of my new apartment, keys trembling in my hand, barely believing my luck. After months of searching through New York's brutal rental market, I'd finally found it, a freshly renovated one-bedroom in Manhattan's East Village for $2,200 a month. The landlord, Mr. Chen, had explained the price was so reasonable because the building had just completed extensive renovations and they wanted reliable tenants quickly. "You're very fortunate, Miss Emma," he'd said with a practiced smile. "This unit just became available 2 weeks ago." Now, as I pushed open the door and stepped inside, the smell of fresh paint and new carpet filled my lungs. Everything gleamed. White walls, polished hardwood floors, stainless steel appliances in the compact kitchen. The afternoon sun streamed through oversized windows, creating geometric patterns of light across the living room. It was perfect. Too perfect, perhaps, but I pushed that thought away. I'd moved to New York 3 months ago for a marketing position at a tech startup, and I'd been sleeping on my college roommate's couch ever since. This apartment represented freedom, independence, a fresh start at 26 years old. I couldn't afford to be suspicious. The first week passed in a blur of unpacking and settling in. I arranged my second-hand furniture, hung my grandmother's watercolors on the pristine walls, and slowly transformed the sterile space into something resembling a home. My neighbors were quiet, almost eerily so. I'd seen a few of them in the hallways, an elderly woman who always looked away when I smiled, a middle-aged man who nodded curtly before hurrying into his apartment, a young couple who whispered to each other and fell silent when I passed. "Everyone keeps to themselves here," explained Mrs. Rodriguez, the superintendent's wife, when I mentioned it. She was a round woman in her 60s, with kind eyes that didn't quite match her nervous smile. "It's a quiet building. People like their privacy." On the 8th night, I couldn't sleep. The radiator clanked and hissed, adjusting to the October chill, and I lay in bed scrolling through my phone until nearly 2 in the morning. That's when I heard it, a sound so faint I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it, a soft thud like something falling, coming from somewhere inside my apartment. I sat up, heart hammering, and listened. Nothing, just the ambient noise of the city filtering through the windows, distant sirens, the rumble of the subway beneath the street, the occasional car horn. I was about to lie back down when I heard it again, definitely inside the apartment, definitely not my imagination. I grabbed my phone, turned on its flashlight, and crept out of the bedroom. The living room was empty, shadows playing across the furniture. The kitchen was undisturbed. I checked the bathroom, the closet by the front door, even looked inside the oven. Nothing seemed out of place. As I stood in the middle of my living room feeling foolish, my eyes landed on the built-in wardrobe that ran along the entire north wall of the bedroom. It was one of the apartment's best features, floor-to-ceiling storage that Mr. Chen had proudly shown off during the viewing. I'd filled it with my clothes and boxes, but I'd never really examined it closely. Now, standing in the doorway between the living room and bedroom, something struck me as odd. The wardrobe seemed too deep. The apartment wasn't that large, and the building was old. Pre-war, Mr. Chen had said, built in 1928. Where did all that depth go? I walked over to the wardrobe and opened its doors. My clothes hung neatly on one side, boxes were stacked on the other. I knocked on the back panel. It sounded hollow, different from the solid thud of the walls elsewhere in the apartment. My hands moved before my rational mind could stop them. I began removing my clothes, hanging them over the bed, then the boxes, stacking them in the living room. The shelf came out easily. It wasn't screwed in, just resting on supports. Within 20 minutes, the wardrobe was completely empty. The back panel was made of cheap particle board, the kind used for temporary construction or quick cover-ups. It didn't match the quality of the rest of the renovation. I ran my fingers along the edges, feeling for seams, and found them, a rectangular outline, roughly 6 feet tall and 3 feet wide. There was a door here, hidden behind the wardrobe, concealed behind a hastily installed false back. My fingers found a small gap at the bottom right corner. I pulled, and the particle board panel came away with a soft creak, revealing darkness beyond. I aimed my phone's flashlight into the void. It was a room. A small room, perhaps 8 feet by 10 feet, with no windows and walls that hadn't been renovated. The wallpaper was old-fashioned, a faded floral pattern, peeling at the edges. The floor was scuffed hardwood, nothing like the polished planks in my apartment. And there were things inside, furniture, belongings. Every instinct screamed at me to close the panel, put everything back, pretend I'd never found this. But curiosity, or perhaps something darker, something more compulsive, drove me forward. I stepped through the doorway into the hidden room. The air was stale, thick with dust and something else, something organic and unsettling that I couldn't quite identify. My flashlight beam swept across the space. There was a small bed against one wall, neatly made with a faded floral bedspread that matched the wallpaper. A nightstand held a lamp, an alarm clock stopped at 3:47, and a stack of books. A dresser stood against another wall, its surface crowded with photographs in frames. I approached the dresser, my hand shaking as I picked up the first photograph. It showed a young woman, maybe in her early 30s, with long dark hair and a bright smile. She was standing in front of the Statue of Liberty, squinting against the sun. The next photo showed the same woman with an elderly couple, probably her parents, then one of her with a golden retriever, then one of her sitting on a park bench reading a book. "Who are you?" I whispered to the smiling face in the photos. I set down the frames and pulled open the top dresser drawer. Clothes neatly folded. Women's clothes, size small, expensive brands. The second drawer held more of the same. The third contained personal items, a jewelry box, a passport, a checkbook. My hands trembled as I opened the passport. The woman from the photos stared back at me, her name printed below, Sarah Catherine Mitchell. Date of birth, March 14th, 1988. That made her 36 years old. The passport had been issued 3 years ago. The checkbook was from Chase Bank, the last entry dated April 12th of this year. 6 months ago, just 6 months ago, Sarah Mitchell had written a check for $67.15 to Con Edison for her electricity bill. I pulled out my phone and did what I should have done the moment I found this room. I called the police. 911, what's your emergency? I found something in my apartment, a hidden room. There are someone's belongings here, and I think something bad might have happened. The operator's voice became sharp, professional. What's your address, ma'am? I gave it to her, my voice steadier than I felt. Are you in immediate danger? I don't think so. The room is empty, just the belongings. Stay on the line. Officers are on their way. I stood there in that hidden room, phone pressed to my ear, staring at Sarah Mitchell's smiling face in the photographs, and a terrible certainty settled over me. The renovation hadn't been about improvement. It had been about concealment, about erasing evidence, about making someone disappear, and somewhere in this building, someone knew exactly what had happened to Sarah Mitchell, someone who would now know that I had found their secret. The police arrived 17 minutes later. I heard their heavy footsteps in the hallway, the authoritative knock on my door. 2 officers, a tall black man in his 40s with grey at his temples, and a younger Hispanic woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Miss Emma Torres?" the male officer asked, glancing at his notepad. "Yes, thank you for coming so quickly. I'm Officer Marcus Davis. This is Officer Janet Ruiz. You reported finding a hidden room." I led them through my apartment, past the scattered boxes and clothes I'd removed from the wardrobe. Officer Ruiz's eyes swept over everything, cataloguing, assessing. When I showed them the false panel and the room beyond, both officers fell silent. "Jesus," Officer Davis muttered, pulling out his flashlight. "How long have you lived here?" 8 days. I just moved in. The landlord said the building had been renovated, that the apartment had just become available. Officer Ruiz stepped into the hidden room, her flashlight beam methodically scanning every surface. She pulled latex gloves from her belt and carefully picked up Sarah Mitchell's passport. "Sarah Catherine Mitchell," she read aloud. "Davis, call this in. We need detectives down here." The next 2 hours dissolved into a surreal blur. More officers arrived, then 2 detectives, a weary-looking man named Chen who wasn't related to my landlord, and his partner, a woman named Detective Sarah Park, who had the intense focus of someone who never forgot a detail. They photographed everything. They bagged the passport, the checkbook, several of the photographs. They asked me the same questions multiple times, slightly rephrased, checking for inconsistencies in my story. Where had I lived before? How had I found this apartment? Had I met any of my neighbors? Had anything else seemed unusual? "The neighbors are very quiet," I told Detective Park, "almost anxious. And the superintendent's wife, Mrs. Rodriguez, she seemed nervous when I asked about it." Detective Park wrote that down. "We'll talk to everyone in the building. Do you know what happened to her, to Sarah Mitchell?" The detective's expression remained carefully neutral. "We're going to look into it. In the meantime, Miss Torres, I need you to be very careful. Don't discuss what you found with anyone in this building. If someone approaches you with questions, call me immediately." She handed me a card with her direct number. "You think I'm in danger? I think you've stumbled onto something that someone went to considerable trouble to hide. Until we understand what happened here, caution is warranted." They left around 5 in the morning, taking most of Sarah Mitchell's belongings as evidence, but leaving the furniture. Detective Park suggested I stay with a friend, but I refused. This was my apartment. I'd signed a lease, paid first and last month's rent, plus security deposit. I couldn't afford to just abandon it. Besides, some stubborn part of me needed to know what had happened here. I didn't sleep. As dawn broke over the city, painting my walls in shades of pink and gold, I sat on my couch with my laptop and began to search. Sarah Mitchell, New York, returned thousands of results. I refined it. Sarah Catherine Mitchell missing. Nothing recent. I tried Sarah Mitchell disappearance April and Sarah Mitchell East Village. Finally, I found something. Not a news article, but a post on a neighborhood Facebook group dated April 20th, 8 days after Sarah's last checkbook entry. Has anyone seen Sarah Mitchell from building 318 East 9th Street? She hasn't responded to calls or texts in over a week. Her work says she hasn't shown up. I'm getting worried. Lisa Chen. The post had 37 comments. I scrolled through them, my coffee growing cold in my hand. I knocked on her door yesterday. No answer. Did you call the police? I saw her super checking her apartment, said everything looked normal like she'd just stepped out. Maybe she went on vacation. Sarah would have told someone. This isn't like her. Has anyone actually filed a missing person report? The thread ended abruptly with no resolution. I searched for Lisa Chen's profile and sent her a message. Hi Lisa, I'm the new tenant in Sarah Mitchell's former apartment. I found something concerning, and the police are now involved. Can we talk? I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then continued searching. I found Sarah's LinkedIn profile. She'd been a graphic designer at a boutique agency in Soho. Her profile hadn't been updated since March. I found her Instagram last post dated April 8th, a photo of coffee and pastries with the caption, "Perfect Sunday morning." The comments were filled with concern from friends. Sarah, where are you? Please call me, I'm worried. Has anyone heard from her? I was so absorbed in my research that I jumped when someone knocked on my door. My heart hammering, I checked the peephole. It was Mrs. Rodriguez, the superintendent's wife, holding a covered dish. I opened the door cautiously, keeping the chain on. "Miss Torres," she said, her smile even more nervous than before. "I made too much arroz con pollo last night. I thought you might like some. Welcome to the building." Through the narrow gap I could see her eyes trying to peer past me into the apartment, looking for something, checking for something. "That's very kind, but I'm actually heading out soon." "Oh, it will only take a moment." She shifted the dish and I caught a glimpse of something in her other hand. Keys. A large ring of keys like a superintendent would carry. "Mrs. Rodriguez, did you know Sarah Mitchell?" Her face went pale. The smile disappeared. "Who?" "Sarah Mitchell, the woman who lived in this apartment before me." I don't know that name. You must be confused. The previous tenant was a man, Mr. Patterson. He moved to Boston for work." She was lying. I could see it in the way her eyes darted away, the way her hands trembled slightly, making the keys jingle. "The police were here last night," I said, watching her reaction carefully. "They'll probably want to talk to you and your husband." Something flickered across her face. Fear, definitely fear, but something else too. Warning? Regret? "Miss Torres, please, be careful who you trust in this building. Not everything is as it seems. Some secrets are kept for good reasons." "What does that mean?" She leaned closer, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "Go to the basement, the old storage area that was supposed to be demolished during the renovation. There's a box marked Building Records 1998 to 2010. Look inside, but do it when my husband is making his rounds upstairs. He goes at 2 every afternoon." Before I could respond, she thrust the dish of rice into my hands and hurried away down the hallway, her keys jingling with each step. I closed the door and locked it, including the deadbolt and chain. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the dish. Why would Mrs. Rodriguez tell me that? Was it a trap? A warning? What was in that box? I set the rice on the counter, suddenly suspicious of everything, even food. My phone buzzed with a response from Lisa Chen. "Oh my God, yes. Can you meet today? I've been trying to get answers about Sarah for months. The police said there was no evidence of foul play, and she was an adult who could leave if she wanted. But she wouldn't just disappear. She had a cat, for God's sake. Mr. Whiskers was found alone in her apartment. No food, no water. Sarah would never abandon him. Something happened to her. Please tell me you found something." I typed back, "Can you meet me at the coffee shop on the corner of 9th and 2nd Avenue at noon? I'll be there." I had 4 hours until that meeting and 6 hours until Mrs. Rodriguez's suggested reconnaissance mission to the basement. 4 hours to decide if I was brave enough, or foolish enough, to keep digging into whatever had happened to Sarah Mitchell. I walked back to the hidden room, standing in the doorway and looking at the stripped bed, the empty dresser, the walls that had been concealed behind a false panel, and my wardrobe. The morning light didn't reach this space. It was perpetually in shadow, perpetually cold. Someone had lived here. Someone had slept in that bed, worn those clothes, written in that checkbook. Sarah Mitchell had been real, had been alive, and then she'd simply vanished. The renovation had covered her existence like dirt thrown on a grave, and now I was living in what was essentially her tomb. My phone rang, making me jump. Detective Park. Miss Torres, I wanted to update you. We ran Sarah Mitchell's information. She was reported missing by friends in late April, but the case went cold quickly. No evidence of a struggle in her apartment, no suspicious activity on her bank accounts or credit cards. Her phone was found in her apartment, turned off. Her car was still in the building's garage. It was treated as a voluntary disappearance. But it wasn't, I said. She's in the hidden room. Her things are there. That's what we're investigating now. But Miss Torres, there's something else. We contacted the building's owner. He claims he has no knowledge of any hidden room. He says the renovation was standard, updating kitchens and bathrooms, refinishing floors. He provided the architectural plans. Your apartment shows no additional space. Officially, that room doesn't exist. But I found it. You saw it. I know. Which means someone went to a lot of trouble to make it disappear from the official records. We're looking into the construction company that did the renovation, but they've been very uncooperative. We may need a warrant. Detective, the superintendent's wife just came to my door. She told me to look in the basement, in old building records. She seemed scared. A pause. Don't go into that basement alone, Miss Torres. If you're going to look, call me first. I'll send an officer. She said to go at 2 this afternoon when her husband is making rounds. Then I'll have someone there at 1:45. Don't go down there without us. After she hung up, I made myself eat something, shower, change clothes. Normal activities to convince myself this was still a normal day, but my eyes kept drifting to the wardrobe, to the darkness beyond, to the space that officially didn't exist. At 11:45, I grabbed my jacket and headed out to meet Lisa Chen, eager to learn everything I could about Sarah Mitchell, the woman whose ghost now haunted my home. Lisa Chen was already at the coffee shop when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of her. She was in her early 30s with short black hair and red-rimmed eyes that suggested she hadn't been sleeping well. When she saw me, she stood up so quickly, her chair scraped against the floor. "Emma, I'm Lisa. I got you a cappuccino. I hope that's okay." "Thank you." I slid into the seat across from her and she immediately leaned forward, her voice urgent. "What did you find?" "The police wouldn't tell me anything when I called this morning. They just said there was an ongoing investigation into Sarah's disappearance." I glanced around the coffee shop. It was crowded with the lunch rush, people on laptops, couples talking over sandwiches. Good, public, safe. "There's a hidden room in the apartment," I said quietly, "behind a wardrobe. It was sealed up during the renovation. Sarah's belongings were inside. Clothes, photographs, personal documents, everything suggesting she didn't just leave voluntarily." Lisa's hand flew to her mouth. Oh God, I knew it. I told the police something was wrong. Sarah would never just disappear. We'd been friends since college. She told me everything. "Tell me about her." "The police think she left willingly, but you don't." "Because I know Sarah." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "She was careful, organized, responsible. She'd been living in that building for 4 years. She loved that apartment, loved the neighborhood. She had a great job, close friends, her cat. Why would she abandon all of that?" "When was the last time you saw her?" "April 7th. We had dinner at that Thai place on 10th Street. She seemed fine, happy even. She'd just gotten a promotion at work. She was planning a trip to Portugal in June. She'd already bought the tickets. We made plans to meet for brunch that following Sunday, April 14th, but she never showed up. I texted, called, nothing. I went to her building, but this guy named Miguel Rodriguez, he wouldn't let me in. Said Sarah had told him she didn't want visitors." "That's strange." "That's what I thought. Sarah never said anything like that to me. I tried calling the police, but they said they'd do a wellness check. Then they told me her apartment was fine, no signs of disturbance, and she was an adult who could come and go as she pleased. But Emma, I know Sarah. She wouldn't ghost everyone who cared about her. And her cat." Her voice broke. "When they finally let me into the apartment after 2 weeks, Mr. Whiskers was there alone. His litter box was full. His water bowl was empty. Sarah would die before she'd let her cat suffer." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Where's Mr. Whiskers now?" "I have him. I couldn't just leave him there." Lisa pulled out her phone and showed me a photo of an orange tabby cat with green eyes. "He's been depressed. Cats grieve, you know. He keeps looking for her." "Lisa, did Sarah ever mention anything unusual about the building? Strange neighbors? Problems with the super?" She thought for a moment. "Not really. She liked most of her neighbors. There was an elderly woman, Mrs. Kowalski, who she'd help with groceries sometimes. A young couple she'd have drinks with occasionally. The super and his wife were always polite, but distant. Oh, but she did mention something weird about a month before she disappeared." "What?" She said the building owner was pushing hard for renovations. There was going to be a tenant meeting about it. Some people were worried about displacement, rent increases after improvements. Sarah said the super seemed really stressed about it, like he was caught in the middle. The owner wanted everyone to agree to temporary relocations during construction. Did Sarah agree? She refused. She said she'd looked at the renovation plans and they didn't make sense. They wanted to reconfigure apartments, change layouts. Even though the building was rent-stabilized, she thought they were trying to find loopholes to push people out. My coffee had gone cold in my hands. So Sarah was fighting the renovation. Yes, she was actually organizing other tenants to push back. She'd found a tenant rights lawyer and everything. She was scheduled to present their case to the building owner on April 15th, 3 days after she disappeared. Lisa, I need you to think carefully. In the days before Sarah vanished, did she mention feeling unsafe, threatened? Did anyone warn her to back off? Not that she told me. But Sarah was tough. She might not have mentioned it if she didn't want me to worry. Lisa leaned closer. Do you think someone in that building hurt her because she was fighting the renovation? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. We talked for another 30 minutes. Lisa showed me more photos of Sarah, laughing at a birthday party, hiking in the Catskills, volunteering at an animal shelter. She gave me the names of Sarah's other close friends, her parents' contact information in Oregon, the name of her lawyer. By the time we parted ways, I had a clearer picture of who Sarah Mitchell had been. Someone kind, principled, and unwilling to be pushed around. Someone who'd made herself an obstacle to something important enough to kill for. I returned to my apartment at 1:30. Detective Park had texted that Officer Ruiz would meet me in the lobby at 1:45 to accompany me to the basement. I had 15 minutes, so I did what I'd been avoiding all morning. I called my mother. Emma, honey, I was just thinking about you. How's the new apartment? It's complicated, Mom. I gave her an abbreviated version. The hidden room, the police, my promise to be careful. Oh my God, Emma, you need to move out of there immediately. I can't afford to. I paid first and last month plus security. That's over $6,000 I can't get back. Your safety is more important than money. I know, Mum, but I also need to know what happened here. This woman, Sarah, she just vanished. Everyone forgot about her. Someone sealed up her entire existence behind a wall. Don't you think that's wrong? My mother was quiet for a moment. Of course it's wrong. But baby, you're not a detective. Let the police handle it. The police already gave up once. They decided she left voluntarily. And maybe she did. She didn't. I know she didn't. I couldn't explain how I knew this. The certainty that had settled in my bones. Maybe it was seeing her photographs, her smile, her carefully organized belongings. Maybe it was Lisa's grief. Or maybe it was the fear I'd seen in Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes. Emma, I have to go, Mom. The police are here. I'll call you tonight, I promise. I hung up before she could argue further and went downstairs. Officer Ruiz was waiting in the lobby, her expression professional but concerned. Detective Park briefed me. Let's be quick about this. The basement access was through a heavy metal door near the building's rear exit. Officer Ruiz went first, her hand resting casually on her service weapon. The stairs were concrete, poorly lit, descending into a maze of corridors that smelled of mildew and old paint. Building records should be in the old storage area, I said, remembering Mrs. Rodriguez's instructions. She said it was supposed to be demolished during renovation, but wasn't. We walked past the current storage area, neat wire cages where tenants kept their belongings, and into a darker section of the basement. This part felt forgotten, with exposed pipes overhead and walls showing their age. We found the storage area at the end of a narrow hallway, a large room filled with filing cabinets, old furniture and stacks of boxes. 1998 to 2010, I muttered, scanning the labels. Officer Ruiz helped me search and we found the box on a high shelf in the back corner. She pulled it down, and we carried it to a relatively clean area where light from a small window provided some illumination. Inside were building inspection reports, tenant complaint forms, maintenance logs, and correspondence between the building owner and the city. We sorted through them carefully and then I found it, a folder labeled Structural Issues, Confidential. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first document was an engineer's report dated March 15, 2009. It detailed significant structural problems in the building's north wall, the wall that ran along the bedrooms of the apartments on that side. My side. Jesus, Officer Ruiz whispered, reading over my shoulder. They found evidence of severe water damage and potential wall failure. They recommended immediate repairs and temporary tenant relocation. But they didn't do it, I said, flipping through the subsequent documents. Look, the building owner kept delaying, saying he couldn't afford it. Then the engineer filed a complaint with the city. Then I stopped, my blood running cold. Then the engineer died. The obituary was paper-clipped to the correspondence. Dr. Michael Chen, structural engineer, age 47, died suddenly on July 3, 2009, survived by his wife and 2 children. That's Detective Chen's father, Officer Ruiz said quietly. He told me once his dad was an engineer who died young. Heart attack, he said. We kept reading. After Dr. Chen's death, a new engineer signed off on minimal repairs. The structural issues were marked as resolved with cosmetic fixes, but at the bottom of the file, there was a handwritten note on a sticky note, the ink faded but legible. North Wall Apartments. Room sealed and removed from official plans per owner's instruction. Ensure all documentation removed from public records. Payment received. There was no signature, but there was a date. August 2009. They knew, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. They knew those rooms were structurally unsound, but instead of fixing them, they just sealed them up, made them disappear from the plans. And anyone who lived there and knew about the original layout, Officer Ruiz didn't finish the sentence, she didn't need to. Sarah had lived there for 4 years. She would have known the original size of her apartment. When they proposed renovations, when she looked at the new plans, she would have noticed the discrepancy. She would have asked questions that would reveal a cover-up that's been going on for 16 years. We looked at each other in the dim basement light, and I saw my own horror reflected in Officer Ruiz's eyes. This wasn't just about one woman's disappearance. This was about systematic corruption, about cutting corners and hiding evidence, about how many other tenants might have discovered the truth over the years. We need to show this to Detective Park immediately, Officer Ruiz said, pulling out her phone. And we need to find out who else has lived in these North Wall apartments since 2009, because if Sarah isn't the first person to disappear after discovering this secret. A sound echoed from somewhere in the basement. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, coming closer. Officer Ruiz put a finger to her lips and gestured for me to get behind her. Her hand moved to her weapon. The footsteps grew louder, and then a figure appeared in the doorway of the storage room. It was Miguel Rodriguez, the superintendent, and he was holding a crowbar. "Step back, Mr. Rodriguez," Officer Ruiz commanded, her hand firmly on her weapon but not yet drawing it. "Put down the crowbar." Miguel Rodriguez stood in the doorway, the crowbar hanging loosely in his right hand. He looked older than I remembered from our brief encounters, his hair grayer, his face haggard with deep lines carved around his mouth and eyes. He wasn't looking at the weapon in his hand or at Officer Ruiz's gun. He was looking at the box of files between us, at the folder marked Structural Issues, Confidential, lying open. "You shouldn't have found that," he said quietly. His voice held no threat, only exhaustion, defeat. "Mr. Rodriguez, I need you to put the crowbar down now," Officer Ruiz repeated, her tone sharper. He looked at the crowbar, as if surprised to find it in his hand, then carefully set it against the wall and raised his empty palms. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm here because my wife told me what she said to you, Miss Torres. She shouldn't have done that. She doesn't understand what she's risking." "What happened to Sarah Mitchell?" I demanded, my voice steadier than I felt. Miguel's shoulders sagged. He looked suddenly smaller, older, broken. "I didn't kill her, if that's what you're asking. But I know who did, and I know why. And God forgive me, I've kept quiet about it for 6 months because I'm a coward." Officer Ruiz had her phone out, calling for backup, but she kept her eyes on Miguel. "Start talking, Mr. Rodriguez, and don't move." He nodded slowly and leaned against the doorframe, as if his legs could barely hold him. "I've been the super here for 23 years. My wife and we have an apartment in the basement, rent-free. It's not much, but it's ours. When Mr. Hendricks bought this building 15 years ago, things started to change." "Richard Hendricks?" Officer Ruiz asked. "The property developer?" "Yes. He bought 6 buildings in this neighborhood around the same time, all rent-stabilized, all with long-term tenants paying below market rates. He wanted them out. But you can't just evict rent-stabilized tenants in New York without cause, so he started making their lives difficult. Delayed repairs, harassment, anything to get them to leave. Most did, eventually, but a few held on." "And the structural issues?" I asked, gesturing to the folder. "That was before Hendricks bought the building. The previous owner knew about the North Wall problems, but couldn't afford the repairs. When Hendricks bought it, he inherited the liability. That engineer, Dr. Chen, he was honest. He filed complaints with the city. Hendricks was facing hundreds of thousands in mandatory repairs and potential lawsuits if tenants found out they'd been living in unsafe conditions." Miguel's hands trembled as he continued. "Then Dr. Chen died. Heart attack, they said, but I always wondered. After that, Hendricks brought in his own people. They sealed up the damaged sections of the apartments, removed them from the official plans, paid off inspectors. The tenants in those units were quietly relocated, given deals they couldn't refuse, settlements with NDAs attached. By 2010, everyone who'd lived there during the original issues was gone, except the records remained, Officer Ruiz said, nodding to the box. Hendricks didn't know about this storage area. The previous owner kept duplicates of everything down here, old-school filing. When I realized what was in these boxes, I should have gone to the authorities. But Hendricks, he made it clear what would happen if anyone talked. My wife and I would lose our apartment. We'd lose everything. And we're not young anymore. Where would we go? I thought of Mrs. Rodriguez's nervous smile, her fearful eyes. So, you kept quiet. For years, it didn't matter. The tenants in the North Wall apartments never knew about the hidden rooms. They just thought they had smaller units. The rent was lower to compensate. Everyone seemed content. He rubbed his face with both hands. Then, Sarah Mitchell started organizing against the new renovations. She found the discrepancies in the plans, I said. She was smart. Too smart. She measured her apartment, compared it to the original building blueprints she got from the city archives. She realized space was missing. She started asking questions, digging into the building's history. She contacted Dr. Chen's family. She was going to expose everything. Officer Ruiz's backup arrived then. 3 officers, including Detective Park, who must have been nearby. They secured Miguel while Detective Park knelt beside us, quickly scanning the documents in the folder. "Keep talking, Mr. Rodriguez," she said. "What happened to Sarah Mitchell?" Miguel's voice broke. "Hendricks came to the building on April 12th. He wanted to talk to Sarah, to offer her money to drop her investigation. I let him into her apartment. God help me. I used my master key. I thought they were just going to talk. I swear I thought it would just be a conversation. But it wasn't," I whispered. "I heard shouting. I went back upstairs and listened at her door. Sarah was telling him she'd go to the press, to the city, to everyone. She said people had a right to know they'd been living in dangerous conditions. Hendricks, he got angry. I heard things breaking. Then it got quiet. Too quiet." Tears ran down Miguel's weathered face. When Hendricks came out, his hands were shaking. He told me there'd been an accident. He said Sarah had fallen, hit her head. He said if I called 911, if I told anyone what happened, he'd make sure my wife and I went to prison for being accessories. He said we'd enabled years of housing violations. He said no one would believe we weren't complicit. "Where is she?" Detective Park demanded. "Where is Sarah Mitchell's body?" The construction crew came that night. Hendricks' private people, the ones who'd done the original cover-up. They sealed her in the wall, in the hidden room. They put her belongings in there like she'd just left them. Then they closed it up and scheduled the renovation to start the next week. The official story was that Sarah had moved out, that she'd broken her lease and left. I forged her signature on the paperwork. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." The basement seemed to tilt around me. Sarah Mitchell hadn't just disappeared. She'd been murdered and entombed in her own home, and I'd been sleeping 15 feet away from her body for over a week. "We need to open that wall," Detective Park said, already on her radio calling for the crime scene unit. Now. The next hours passed in a blur of activity that felt both frantic and dreamlike. The entire building was evacuated. Crime scene investigators in white suits descended on my apartment with tools and equipment. They carefully dismantled the false panel I'd discovered, then began the grim work of opening the walls of the hidden room itself. I waited in the hallway with the other displaced tenants, wrapped in a blanket someone had given me, even though it wasn't cold. Mrs. Rodriguez was there too, crying softly. She'd told the police everything she knew once Miguel had confessed. She'd suspected, but hadn't been sure. She'd been terrified. Lisa Chen arrived after I called her. She stood beside me, holding my hand, both of us waiting for confirmation of what we already knew. At 7:34 that evening, Detective Park came out of my apartment. Her face was grim. "We found her," she said quietly. "Sarah Mitchell was sealed inside the wall, exactly where Mr. Rodriguez said. The medical examiner will conduct an autopsy, but preliminary examination suggests blunt force trauma to the head, consistent with his account." Lisa made a sound like a wounded animal and collapsed against me. I held her while she sobbed, my own tears finally coming. "We'd found Sarah, but we'd found her too late." "Richard Hendricks?" I asked. "Units are on the way to his residence now. We have enough for an arrest warrant. Rodriguez's testimony, the documents, the body. He won't get away with this." But I thought about Dr. Chen, who died so conveniently, about the 16 years of cover-ups and corruption, about how many people must have been paid off or intimidated into silence. Men like Richard Hendricks didn't go down easily. Over the following weeks, the case exploded into the media. Richard Hendricks was arrested and charged with second-degree murder, evidence tampering, bribery, and a long list of housing violations across his portfolio of buildings. Miguel Rodriguez was arrested as an accessory after the fact, but was released on bail pending trial. His cooperation had been deemed crucial to the prosecution. The investigation expanded. They discovered that 3 other tenants in North Wall apartments across Hendricks buildings had voluntarily broken their leases and disappeared from public records over the years. One was found living in Nevada under a different name. She'd been paid $50,000 to leave and sign an NDA. The other 2 were still missing. The police were now treating them as potential homicides. Dr. Chen's death was reopened as a suspicious case. His medical records showed he'd been healthy, no heart problems, no risk factors. His widow told investigators he'd received threatening phone calls in the weeks before he died. The case was officially reclassified from natural causes to undetermined, possibly homicide. The building itself was condemned pending structural inspection. All remaining tenants were relocated. I moved out within a week, staying with Lisa in her apartment in Brooklyn while I searched for a new place. My landlord, who turned out to be a shell company owned by Hendricks, never returned my deposit or rent. I hired a lawyer. It would be a long fight. Sarah Mitchell's parents came to New York to bring their daughter home. I met them at the medical examiner's office, felt the need to apologize for living in the space where she'd died, for not finding her sooner. Her mother hugged me. "You found her," she said through her tears. "Everyone else had given up, but you found her. You brought her back to us." Her father just nodded, unable to speak, his eyes red and hollow. Sarah was buried in Portland in a small ceremony attended by dozens of people whose lives she'd touched. I went with Lisa, and we stood together at the graveside as they lowered her into the ground. A proper burial this time, in sunlight and open air, not sealed in darkness behind false walls. The trial began 8 months later. I testified about finding the hidden room, about the documents in the basement, about Mrs. Rodriguez's warning. Miguel Rodriguez testified about what he'd witnessed, his voice shaking with remorse. The prosecution built their case methodically. The structural cover-up, the financial motive, the physical evidence, the testimony of intimidated witnesses who finally felt safe enough to speak. Richard Hendricks was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years to life. His conviction opened floodgates, lawsuits from former tenants, criminal investigations into his business practices, civil rights violations. His real estate empire crumbled. Miguel Rodriguez pleaded guilty to evidence tampering and received 5 years, with most of the sentence suspended due to his cooperation. Mrs. Rodriguez was not charged. They moved to New Jersey to live with their daughter. I never went back to that building. It was eventually torn down after inspectors found the structural issues were far worse than anyone had realized. The entire north wall was on the verge of collapse. If Sarah hadn't discovered the truth, if she hadn't fought back, dozens of tenants might have been killed when it finally gave way. A new building stands there now, luxury condos starting at $3 million. There's a small plaque near the entrance that reads, "In memory of Sarah Catherine Mitchell, who fought for truth and justice. Her courage revealed corruption and saved countless lives." I think about her often, about her smile in the photographs, her love for Mr. Whiskers, her refusal to back down when she uncovered wrongdoing. Lisa and I meet monthly for dinner, and we always toast to Sarah, the woman who wouldn't be silenced, even when they tried to wall her away from the world. I found a new apartment eventually, in a different neighborhood, in a building with transparent ownership and no hidden rooms. But sometimes late at night, I wake up thinking about those 8 days I spent living beside Sarah's tomb, separated from her by just a wall and a wardrobe. I think about how thin the barriers are between the living and the dead, between truth and lies, between justice and corruption. I think about how easily people disappear in a city of 8 million souls, how convenient it is for the powerful when the powerless simply vanish. And I'm grateful that I was curious enough to knock on that hollow wall, grateful for Mrs. Rodriguez's guilty conscience, grateful for Lisa's refusal to let her friend be forgotten. Sarah Mitchell didn't get to tell her own story, but at least now, everyone knows her name. At least now she can rest in peace in the sunlight, not buried in darkness in a room that was never supposed to exist. And that, I tell myself on the nights when sleep won't come, that has to be enough. Leave your like. It's quick, free, and shows me I'm on the right path. Subscribe and turn on the bell to never miss our upcoming stories. Thank you for being here with me. See you in the next story.